Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. This is a special transmission. We're trying to give you a little bit more of an insight into the revelations about Twitter files. Just in the last couple of days, a couple of big releases came out, Twitter Files 2 and Twitter Files 3, and we'll help you navigate these things. In the description section, we have put two links that tell you the actual data, which is what we are trying to parse. I mean, these are long threads and it's easy for you to get lost in that. So we thought we'll try to make it, simplify it, and easy for you to understand what some of these technical terms mean. These are terms used internally inside Twitter when they were dealing with filtering and so on and so forth. Remember one thing, guys, I have been saying this for a while now, that Twitter was overstaffed and that they could do with a headcount reduction. And that's what played out eventually. Why did I say all that stuff? Because I felt that there were more people trying to filter than people trying to allow things to come through. So when you have a disabling mechanism first, instead of an enabling mechanism, what was Twitter? Twitter was a messaging platform. And when you're trying to stop people from messaging, then what happens, and that becomes your main job, then it becomes a pointless exercise. Why is Twitter relevant to us even today? It's just the pain of having signed on to this one and being used to hearing from various people, doing this short, crisp messages using 140 characters to start with, and now 280 characters. We got used to that. And for politics, especially for politics, Twitter is the ideal platform because politicians don't have a lot of time. At the same time, they need to be in the limelight, and 140 characters or 280 characters is something they can immediately build up. If you remember, Trump actually popularized Twitter. Before Trump came along, Twitter wasn't this popular, at least in the United States, as a political platform. So people woke up in the morning. Trump was an early morning riser. He would get up in the morning and he'll start belting out tweets. And these were things that was not vetted by his own press team. So there was this challenge that the press team had. Oh, wait a minute, what did he say today in the morning? So he was basically, flying by the seat of his pants, if you will. But whatever that is, what played out around the election time, around all the other tamasha, I'm going to try and lift the veil a little bit and help you understand if you happen to be of a certain ideology and you are wondering why is it that what reach you used to have is no longer there. This is the presentation for you. Can we have the presentation, please? Okay, so Twitter maintained these secret blacklists, and unfortunately for you, if you got caught in one of them, then your account was pretty much done. You would not be able to send tweets, or your tweets will not be seen by different people. And almost in many cases, what people ended up doing was, if they followed someone, they would go to their timeline, that is the followed person's timeline, to see what that person had tweeted. I mean, the wisdom is that if I follow you, then whatever you tweet should come on my timeline. And that was not happening. And this has been a problem for several years now. These were done based on, first of all, their own determination that somebody was violating a certain principle. Sometimes if they didn't like a person, they made up their own principles on the fly. So all that stuff we're going to go through. What are the main ways in which they were trying to filter? The first one was called Trends Blacklist. What is Trends Blacklist? Can you go to the next slide, please? So we're going to go back and forth between these two slides as we go through each one. So if you happen to be flagged under Trends Blacklist, then any tweet that you put out would not be allowed to go into the trending. There used to be a trending a line that used to happen, and a trend, if you got on the trend list, then your virality was 10, 15, 100 times more, and it just went to many people's timelines. And if you're disabled on that one, then you didn't get that. Can we go back to the previous one, please? Okay, in search blacklist. Now, many of you may not use the search function in Twitter except to try and find out, I remember this guy said something about this. Let me go to his timeline to find out what exactly did he say. So that is the search list. So sometimes what they did was, even if you had said something, And if you were blacklisted, then whatever you said would not be appearing for the others. So they can't catch you on a lie that you said. So you see how the thing goes here. Now, before we start, jumping up and down in anger, you have to remember that I think between the last 15 years or so, the campuses in the United States have decidedly gone woke. Only now we're waking up to this. There's a preponderance of drugs, parties, booze, and one wonders, what is it that the kids are going there for? Is it to do all this or to get some education? So there is this huge split. There are students who go there, study, and there are others who kind of party. And some of the brilliant ones are also into bad habits. And plus, remember the first episode that I put out, I had said that the overwhelming workforce in Twitter and perhaps in other social media companies also was democratic in their thought process. And these are kids. These are kids who are extremely bright, but there is a problem with their perception. They are unable to differentiate between their personal bias versus their professional obligation. The professional obligation did not mandate them to filter out the right wing so aggressively, but yet they did that. I mean, it's not just one platform. I've seen this happen to me in Facebook also. I'm saying it out loud right now because I've said this many times. I've reached out with actual data to people like Mark Zuckerberg and the then CEO Sheryl Sandberg, and they didn't care. They didn't even bother responding. They didn't even say, I got your email, I'll respond back to you. I mean, I gave a bunch of data, and I'm talking about 3 years ago when I was having a much higher follower count in Facebook and I was seeing all these problems. Anyway, you just have to lump it and go on. I mean, if many people in Facebook used to believe that if one of their pages was banned, they would start over and start another one from zero and build it back and hopefully and hoped and prayed that the new page will continue. Let's go to the third one, visibility filtering. This is the most important one because someone accidentally blurted this out a few years ago. That is nothing but shadow ban. Visibility filtering is nothing but shadow banning. It's another name, and again, everybody uses acronyms like VF and so on and so forth. And the authors of these threads, they have verified with many people who work at Twitter that confirm that visibility filtering is essentially shadow ban. Let's go back to the previous one, please. And then you have something called as do not amplify. What does do not amplify mean? That means don't allow a particular tweet to go viral, even though it may have had a trending hashtag. It may be on a topic that is recently trending. So essentially, your voice is being suppressed, saying your voice will not be heard, your view will not be heard. I mean, there were people sitting in judgment over whose voice should be heard and whose voice should not be heard. If one social media platform is behaving this way, sure, you understand. But if all of them behave this way, what happens? The one viewpoint that is perhaps not the left but the other side viewpoint, and even the centrist viewpoint, these things got squelched, suppressed, whatever way you want to think of it. That's what happened. And we feel that pain because in 2014 India decidedly turned away from the left liberal policies of the corrupt UPA government. These guys are anti-nationals, most of them. And anyway, that's a different thread. Let's not go there right now. Let's go back to the last one, please, which is SIPPES. Can you go to the next slide? Now, this was a secret group that included the head of the legal policy and trust, like 𝙒𝙖𝙧𝙤𝙬, global head of trust, Yoel Roth, and CEOs like Jack, and so on and so forth, Jack Dorsey, Parag Agarwal. So these were the extremely highly sensitive tweets. For example, if let's say there was a tweet by Trump alleging something or some other head of state saying something, these people would decide and say, okay, should we allow this tweet to go out or not? And if not, then should we, ban it, suspend the account, and so on and so forth. Remember that up until 2020, I think maybe middle of 2020, there wasn't a lot of suspending an account for a day or something like that. Suddenly that started happening in a big way. And to understand all that stuff, I will go to the next slide, which is on Twitter 3. So the first two slides that we talked about right now was on Twitter Files 2, and that was put out by 𝙒𝙖𝙦 Ways, and I have given you the two trends. You can go and click on those, and you will get them in storyline format. Whatever I'm saying here is a simplified version of those. So I'm not making up my own analysis here. I'm just trying to demystify some of these things for our viewers, because it's a little technical, and it's easier to understand these things by understanding it and applying it to a context. So in 2018, they were specifically asked this question, because that's what I was telling you, that one programmer in a drunken state accidentally blurted out that, yes, we do shadow ban. Yes, if your tweets are not going as viral as it used to, then it is because most likely it is shadow ban. And this is something where, the idea initially was that Twitter came up with the rules, and these rules were being enforced using algorithms. So most of the stuff about somebody being squelched, somebody being shadow banned, somebody being visibility filtered, what have you, used to happen based on algorithmic basis. That means no human hand was looking at it. But how do you train the algorithm? That's where the question is. And this is where my observation that somebody's professional obligations were in conflict with their personal biases. If you are the person doing the filtering, and if you are a rabid Democrat, a raging Democrat, somebody who felt very strongly about your ideas and thoughts, remember that we've been always saying this. Social media has become an echo chamber, where inside that chamber, your thought gets amplified many times over, because you're talking to others who are also ascribing to your view. So what happens is it just becomes a big monster. And this kind of stuff may have happened. I'm not saying could have happened, because why I say may have happened is I have seen perfectly valid tweets being squelched, because if algorithmically you are flagged, then it just does an indiscriminate filtering. It just bam, bam, any tweet from Sree Iyer, boom, shadow ban it. Don't even ask question. Because I've seen this thing. My follower count went up to 30,000 in relatively quick time. And in the last 4 or 5 years, it is still very, very slow. It's not even, I think it's still at 30, 31 or so. And I have the PGurus handle, which is a verified blue tick handle. And that one is also languishing. That's also not growing. So there is also this association. It says there that somebody has multiple handles. That's another flag that they find out. So what? It's not that somebody has multiple handles, and it's a perfectly explainable thing. My personal view shouldn't have to be reflected as PGurus' views. PGurus' handle was used primarily to show our posts, our videos, our other handles, and so on and so forth. And I'm also an author. I'm promoting my books. I go to different events, so these are all my personal opinions. So what's wrong in somebody having multiple handles? Yet it appears that even that was flagged inside Twitter, that a certain individual has multiple handles. And I'm not trying to hide it here. I'm not a Jekyll and Hyde. People know that this is PGurus, and that there's an official handle and there's a personal handle. Okay, so they in 2018 they officially came out and said they don't do shadow ban. So now they may try to escape saying that we didn't do shadow ban, we just did visibility filtering. This will not work. I think by associative reasoning they can be caught on this one. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but all I'm trying to say is all these are leading up to a bunch of lawsuits, in my opinion. If it's not someone from the aggrieved party, there'll be some organization that will start, putting some legal cases on some of these employees personally. I mean, 𝙒𝙖𝙦𝙤𝙦 of the world, Jack Dorsey or Parag Agarwal. I think that's going to happen because the revelations are just too many, and they keep saying that they don't do it, but yet we see every day with all these revelations that there are lots of violations that happen. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, on January 6th, you had the Capitol riots. 5 people died. and they said that this was an incitement by Donald Trump, for which he got impeached again by one-sided, partisan House and Senate, because Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate, and they were also in the White House. They impeached Trump, even though he was no longer in power, but they went ahead and did it. So they have impeached him twice in the House. So of course, the Senate didn't take it, and it just died there. But it was a statement that they made, that this person, whatever he had done, was worthy of being impeached. You think Joe Biden is going to escape it when 2024, if the Republicans come to power? Of course, they will also impeach him. So this has become a waste of time, in my opinion. It's a waste of time for all these highly paid senators and congressmen and women to sit in judgment over a president and say he did this thing right, he did this thing wrong. What about you, your own? You yourself are peddling out lies. What about you? Who's going to impeach you? Who's going to recall you? Anyway, so this is the topic for a different day. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is, in my opinion, a much more damaging set of revelations that came out. Twitter Files 3 is only up until January 6th. Between October 20th to January 6th, what transpired? What kind of communication was going on? What was really happening? October 20th would place it like 18 days or 19 days ahead of the election. Election, I think, was on the first Tuesday of November 2020. Maybe it was November 6th. It doesn't matter. I mean, you get the idea. In that window leading up to the election, what was going on? There was a considerable erosion of standards. So people were violating their own set policies. Remember, I told you about this. Let's go back to the second slide, please. One before. Yeah, this one. See, these were the various ways in which you would be, trying to throttle somebody's viewpoint. And the SIPPES is the specific one we are talking about when we say in Twitter Files 3. Go back to the Twitter Files 3, please. Next one. Yeah. So these high-level executives were violating their own policies. In fact, there is instances of people conversing in a platform called Slack. Now, Slack is something that is very popular in the Silicon Valley in many companies. What Slack does is, if you're going to collaborate on a project, everybody has an account, and then you can put in your comments and so on and so forth, so that instead of meeting in person, you would be e-meeting on Slack. You'll be sharing thoughts. Whenever you get to something, you can go back and weigh in and say, okay, this is what I think, and so on. Slack had a fair amount of popularity and traction. It's easy to understand. They give you all this color stick notes so that you know each person, if it is a particular color, that is person X talking, another person's color is another one. Kind of easy to follow what happens. So now in Twitter Files 3, they have traced a bunch of these new Slack accounts that were created, groups that were created, where a lot of these things were discussed. In fact, in that, they are saying the last point 5, VIO, they were using short forms called VIO. These are all VOs. What VOs is actually is short for violations. They were aware, the high-level executives were aware that they were committing violations, that they were basically flying by the seat of their pants, and that there was no legal standing for some of the decisions that they were taking. They don't have a fig leaf to cover themselves. This is the kind of activity that was going on. Now, you can say that there was pressure from the feds because of what happened in 2016 elections. There were a lot of pressure brought upon by the feds meaning the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Remember, in 2016, the violations were kind of not that complicated when you compare it to 2020. In 2016, what happened was Facebook was alleged to have allowed sites like Cambridge Analytica, or there were some groups that got formed in some Eastern Bloc countries, where one particular town they were given a whole bunch of American English that was being used, and then they would form new pages. They would advertise on those pages, and then they would promote those pages, and those pages went left, right, and to all corners of the United States, and people believe that may have influenced many voters, especially in rural areas, to vote for Trump. Now, if you look at the demographic map of US elections, for the longest time, we've been seeing, I think I've been seeing this since I think 2000, that the rural United States was decidedly turning Republican, and the urban United States was decidedly turning Democratic. And that holds true even today. In fact, in the recently concluded 2022 elections, if you see parts of California, which used to be, all of California used to be blue, except for a few here and there constituencies. Now, even in California, we are seeing that several rural districts are turning red. So this is a trend that has been happening. So whatever happened in 2016 looks like people found newer ways to try and twist the thing to put a new spin on messaging and so on and so forth. So what you have seen thus far is Twitter Files 1, 2, and 3, and we have covered in 2 videos. This is 2 and 3, and there was another video. You can go back and look at that. That was Twitter Files 1. And there is more coming. And one of the things that the blogger said, that Matt Taibbi and 𝙒𝙗𝙗 I Ways said, was that there was so much information that it is very difficult to go through and put them in a way that is easy to understand. So sometimes when you look through these threads, it might look a little bit like a data dump. And I hope that I have explained to you guys what I see is happening. Basically, a lot of violations, but don't think that this was only in Twitter. It is my assertion, it is my assumption, it is my allegation that this pervaded in other social media platforms also. There are social media platforms today that you and I probably are not even aware of, like 4chan, where there's a lot of Hindu-phobic messaging that takes place. But unfortunately, you and I may not be even looking at that, and you don't know what hits you from which side. Especially if you remember that rant that one guy had on an Indian couple eating in a fast food place. So these kinds of things are being, festered. They are being blown up in new platforms like 4chan, Telegram. I'm not saying that they themselves are bad. I'm just saying that these kinds of amplifications are happening. Even in Twitter and Facebook, I see a lot of adult content that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Anyway, let's take some questions now. I guess there are no questions, and Ram Ajay Anand Singh ji, and listen, guys, there is some vilification of individuals. It's not the individuals that make a company. It's a group of individuals that come together to form a company. The average age in social media companies like Twitter and Facebook is between the low 20s to low 30s. Okay, and where we left the ball, where we dropped the ball, was in not trying to understand what was happening in our high schools, what was happening in our colleges. Remember that the workforce is predominantly from United States and maybe some universities from Canada. That's what comprises the workforce in Twitter, Facebook, Google, and so on and so forth. The selection process is extremely difficult, and I've also heard some biases, but unfortunately, these biases cannot be brought out as a policy. But the H&R, the Human Resources Department, and all these organizations is having a very, very hard time trying to justify that somebody was hired or not hired based on their abilities instead of being looked at for their other things such as LGBTQ or something else, some other orientation, whatever. I'm not saying right or wrong. All I'm saying is there's a lot of pressure on the hiring people also. And at the same time, most of the kids are brilliant, but perhaps they were misguided in their thoughts. And this echo chamber is a dangerous thing. However, how do you make them come out of that to see that the real world is something different? I don't know the answer to this. However, it is my belief that now many of them are out of work. They go back to their families. They go back to their rural backgrounds. Maybe they'll be able to see, okay, well, maybe my thoughts were a little bit on the extreme. That realization has to come. And I think this is all I have for today. Thanks for watching. And please like, share, and support to our channel. And don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Also, I would like to thank each and every one of you who are sending in donations using super thanks button or using paypal.me/PGurus. You guys are wonderful. And that's what is keeping us up and running. It takes a fair amount of time and effort to do the research that we come up with. We don't normally just come and talk. We give you a lot of data that backs up what we are saying in our videos, because this is for the more serious reader. You can always go to the description section of our videos. You will see some links for additional reading. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.